Attention chiropractors, slayers of subluxation, unleashers of the imprisoned impulse. Welcome to another episode of the Chiropractic Research Breakdown, where each week we break down the most relevant chiropractic science and philosophy necessary to empower you to change the health of the community from the inside out. I'm Dr. Anthony Pellegrino from ChiroEdge, your host, and I'm here with Dr. Ian Shtulman from I almost said Ian Shtulman Chiropractic, Shtulman Family Chiropractic in Florida. I challenge you guys to say Shtulman 5 times fast today. Dr. Ian will appear in your bathroom mirror if you do that. He's a diplomate in pediatrics from the ICPA and also a new instructor on ethical communication in the perinatal period. Am I correct? Perinatal practice, which is awesome, which is perfect for what we're going to talk about today when it comes to chiropractic research. So recently going through, and I saw you had published an article in the Journal of Pediatric Maternal and Family Health entitled Resolution of Symphysis Pubic Pain and Dysfunction Following Chiropractic Care in a Pregnant Patient, a case study and review of the literature. So in the actual article, it's 5 pages of beauty. And whenever you see, I've read all of your case studies and everything you put out, especially with Dr. Joel Alcantara's name's on there. It's always really cool. Really, really good review, really good case report, really just good to dive in and learn more surrounding what goes on with Webster technique and pubic symphysis dysfunction. But overall, I just kind of want to just dive right in and learn specifically about this case, if you want to kind of take over.
Sure. Long story short, a woman came to me about 20 weeks in pregnancy. And, her first pregnancy seemed to be relatively fine, but this one really didn't go as well as she was hoping. At 20 weeks, she had severe pubic symphysis pain to the point that she was requiring a walker to get through the office. I was actually sitting in my private office and I heard her walk by, and I specifically remember, even though this case is probably about 5 years old, I specifically remember looking at the paperwork and checking out her age because I thought it was a little old woman coming in on one of those walkers. Which we don't have any in South Florida at all. That being said, what we did was something completely different than what she had received in her pregnancy at her OB or any other provider, which is we did a detailed chiropractic evaluation looking for objective indicators of vertebral subluxation or sacral subluxation, pelvic subluxation, pubic symphysis subluxation. And what we essentially found was that her pelvis had shifted in such a way that was putting extra pressure on that pubic symphysis, and it wasn't allowing her to navigate her normal daily life. And this woman's a teacher, she's a mother, right? Her body, is not just for her comfort, it's for her success and ability to affect others. And so it's really important that she was able to have a normal quality of life and normal mobility. Long story short, we did a couple of gentle adjustments, restoring balance to her sacrum using Webster technique. I really like the activator checks for pubic symphysis and tailbone because it gives you a clear yes or no on whether or not you need to intervene, whether or not you need to adjust. And within the matter of a couple of visits, she was a lot better and able to go about her life and experience a much more comfortable, much more successful pregnancy and vaginal birth.
That's awesome. And 3 months in, she fell, right? And it was like
spread eagle, fell out, her feet slid in each direction. And pretty much the last thing you want to have happen if you have pubic symphysis dysfunction. And it set her right back on where she was. And just in a matter of a couple more adjustments after that, her body had been able to heal and regain its normal balance, and she was back to normal. And sometimes we see that in practice where patients are doing really great and all of a sudden they have an aggravating incident and things, their subluxation patterns return and their symptomatology returns. And it's up to us to be able to just keep them on track and get them adjusted and restabilize their spine and pelvis and allow their innate intelligence to really take over and do what it's capable of doing. There's a little bit of roller coaster in the process.
Yeah, sometimes, right? If only healing was completely linear, I think that would all be much easier for our communication.
Should be a perfect line like this. Right?
Yeah, it's perfect. Actually, I was looking, it's like, we could look at it and be like, oh my gosh, you come in a walker, 36 visits over 3 months immediately. But it was 35 visits over 8 months that you saw her. So it wasn't even like this, it wasn't a cookie cutter care plan. It was
We usually, we try to start off a little bit more frequently in the beginning because, again, we need to understand that when we're seeing our patients, the best thing that we can do as a chiropractor is to address their subluxations, right? Reduce their subluxations and allow their bodies to better regulate, better coordinate, better adapt to the world that they live in. And sometimes, based on people's lifestyle, based on the amount of stress they've accumulated, we need to see them more frequently in order to get those subluxations stabilized sooner. And sometimes people don't need as much work and they're able to hold their subluxations or hold their adjustments a lot sooner. So for us, we always start off sooner and more consistently in care, whether it's 2 or 3 times a week, like most chiropractors. But as soon as people start holding their subluxation, right? Not necessarily when they start feeling better, but when they actually come in and they're free of any signs of subluxation, that's when we reduce the frequency, right? Because that's our indication that, hey, you're clear today. You don't need anything. Let's back off. We can reduce the amount that we have to see you. And our goal is to get our patients to a place where they're holding completely. So we go, usually twice a week, then once a week, then every other, the typical thing that you would see. But again, based on objective indicators of subluxation, not symptoms.
Awesome. Yeah. And I was looking at it. So we're basically, it seemed as though for you, the techniques that were used was just like a mix and match specifically to her. So we did a C1 toggle recoil, obviously, found Atlas adjustment. There was Webster with the drop. Then there was activator on the pubic bone, on the ilium, on the ischium. I think there was ischium as well. And it just kind of seemed really individualized. So I know you mentioned activator checks. What other objective indicators of subluxation did you use in this case? Do you use in your office on a regular basis to find out not only what and where to adjust, but when not to?
So during the evaluation for the initial visit, we typically do posture with bilateral scales. We do computerized scans using the Insight subluxation system. So paraspinal thermography, surface EMG, and heart rate variability. And if the person's not pregnant, we'll usually do x-rays to evaluate. We actually look at the lines and get upper cervical toggle recoil listings, analyze the pelvis, look for do the whole Gonstead ilium measurements. And we really like to have an objective indicator, not only why we need to adjust, but know that over the course of care that we're actually making progress. On a visit-to-visit basis, we're primarily using leg checks in our office. I think one of the single most important things chiropractors can do in order to really differentiate themselves from other chiropractors is actually have a pre and post reason for adjusting, right? Objective indicators for subluxation and objective indicators that you actually reduced subluxation. So for us, patients start off supine, and we do a Grostic supine, the old leg check using like the dentate ligament cord theory. And we'll use that as our indication of whether or not we need to toggle or adjust C1. And then they flip over and we do follow a pretty much a Thompson analysis. We do cervical syndrome. We do, Deerfield leg checks. We'll do then, a Webster analysis, with the resistance in the legs. And then after that, once we have everything clear, then we'll use activator to kind of do cleanups, because once the legs are balanced, then you can really use the activator, the challenges and the movements to be able to draw out if you're missing something. And so specifically in pregnancy, we always evaluate tailbone, we always evaluate pubic bone. And then in other patients, we may do activator analysis to look at specifically occiput or upper cervical, just to make sure that we've figured out everything else in the process.
Awesome. I love it. Love those objective indicators. Love using the techniques when necessary and appropriate, and knowing when not to adjust. So moving with it, we were just talking about it. You've published a bunch of case reports. I mean, it's a case study, right? So it's like, it's not the most crazy, I go back and analyze every patient or practice member that's ever come into my office. It's simply, this is a really good case. This is something that's really of value. This is something the community should know. This is something we should look further at. You said you had like a couple questions that you kind of use and analyze when you're putting together a case report. Like, what's your process for deciding, hey, I want to publish this case, and B, to get from that, like from there to publication and out into the community?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it's important because we all have cases that are dramatic in our office, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every dramatic case is worthy of writing up and going through the effort of getting it published. I would say does it contribute to the literature, right? You and I both know that we have patients who come into our office with musculoskeletal pain, with, neck pain, back pain, who their lives are dramatically transformed through chiropractic care, right? We know that there's tremendous value for those people who come into our office. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a huge need for literature, for published literature of those specific cases. So I always like to look at the cases that are a little bit unique. The baby with failure to thrive, the woman with secondary amenorrhea, the child with chronic bedwetting and constipation, and in this case, the pregnant woman with pubic symphysis dysfunction. What is it that's interesting and that's going to contribute to the overall the literature of chiropractic showing that subluxation has a deleterious effect on the nervous system and therefore an effect on the entire body as a whole? So I always first off, ask the question, what case is interesting? What is it that I want to share? And then you have to go through kind of a story, like what did this person come in with? What was their quality of life like? When you came in for the evaluation, what objective indicators did you find on the evaluation to indicate that subluxation was present? What did you do as far as the adjustment? What techniques did you use? What was their response to the adjustment, right? How did they respond after the first one? What did they respond with each course of visit? So what I'll usually do is I'll look back and I'll document, hey, after the third visit, the patient reported this. After the fifth visit, they reported this. And, not every single, visit and every single word, but what are the big dramatic changes that they've noticed over the course of their care? And was there anything that changed that? In this case, this patient had a fall, and obviously that brought back a lot of her subluxation patterns and brought back her symptoms. That's interesting to see that, yeah, sometimes people have exacerbations, and chiropractic can help them with that in that case as well. And then finally, what was their overall change to care? How often do you see them? What was the objective changes over the course of time? And what does that case tell you about chiropractic in general, right? What is it the message that you want this case to share? And then you can use that, whether you're working with somebody like Joel Alcantara, who's incredible over at the ICPA, or whether you're doing it on your own, you can do that as a good guideline of telling a story in the case study that's going to be significant. And that's not only going to contribute to the literature, but for even somebody who is a layperson who might find the abstract, in a chiropractor's office or being shared on Facebook, what does the abstract tell them that they might be able to see themselves in it? How could that be valuable for them in taking action for themselves and their family?
That's awesome. Yeah, when it comes down to it, it's like a case study in itself is like a big worded testimonial almost, right? It's like, when it comes down to it is, so that story is really important. But beyond that, beyond just that, it's putting in such a way that makes sense. Like looking at things like you include heart rate variability, you include you mentioned posture, bilateral scales. Any person who picks that up, any person who understands literature whatsoever understands that if these things improve, quality of life improves, their life improves. We're just relating it to chiropractic and saying, this is what you already know. We're just shining the light on it that we view it as, looking at through those lenses.
And I think that's a really important conversation to have is when you're talking about people, especially people who say, well, there's no evidence or there's no literature to suggest that chiropractic can influence these things. I think the problem is that when we look at literature, too many people want to see A and B, like right together, right next to each other. And the problem in chiropractic is we know that what we do is not a treatment for any specific symptom or condition. And therefore, whenever we try to compare ourselves to an allopathic model as a treatment for any of these conditions, chiropractic naturally falls short. But when we look at chiropractic from a context of what influence does it have on the nervous system, what influence does it have on posture, what influence does it have on thermography, on paraspinal or surface EMG, on heart rate variability, how does chiropractic and reducing subluxation influence the nervous system and the body's ability to perceive and adapt to the world, and what quality of life indicators does that change? Right? Too often we want to say, well, can chiropractic treat this symptom? And the answer is always no. Right? Chiropractic reduces subluxation, and the body with an enhanced adaptive capacity, being less subluxated, will then therefore be able to make dramatic healing changes. But we need to kind of reframe things, because too often we try to put chiropractic into this allopathic research model, and it just doesn't really fit.
Absolutely. I love that. And even with that though, I don't know if you've ever I challenge people, and I don't know if you're nerdy with me, if you like to go on PubMed or anything like that, but one thing I find, like it used to be Friday, now it's Wednesdays. I go on PubMed and I search a couple things. I search chiropractic. I see everything that's been viewed since the last time. And I'll search vagus nerve and see what's been published. And I'll search heart rate variability. And it's amazing to see that like literally the pharmaceutical industry is publishing research showing that people with all of these issues, the things that we have no evidence to support, have like reduction heart rate variability. And that if that improves, that they're like gonna improve.
Yeah.
And it's like, do we sit here and claim, well, like, does chiropractic treat bedwetting? No, it improves the adaptive capacity, and tons of literature out there shows that improved adaptive capacity can, in people who have reduced adaptive capacity, who have bedwetting, they can see improvements. Will they always? No, that's not how it works. Not everybody who takes an antihypertensive medication sees immediate drops in their blood pressure. That's not how it works. So it just drives me crazy when we have this mindset that's like, oh, there's no evidence to support this. And it's just like, I mean, if you just want to look around with blinders on and say, the only thing I consider to be evidence is this one little thing, then you're just missing the boat. And I think that the communication on this, which is really what I mean, like the research, everything like that, even just following you and your communication, different groups that we're in together, in the interwebs, your communication. I'm so glad you're teaching this ICPA seminar. I'm looking forward to taking myself, because that's always been something that's been really clear for you, or I found to be clear for you, that like above all, how are we communicating and what are we doing in an ethical manner? Not just saying something just simply to say, if I say this person's going to choose to come and convince you whether or not it's true, but saying, how do I say this 100% accurately supported, evidence informed, right? And also ethically. So with that, when we look at something like Webster's and we look at something like heart rate variability, and you're communicating this change, this person who came in who's in a walker with pubic symphysis dysfunction, and the number one thing that they want to know is like, can you help this, or can you help me with this? Like, how does your communication relate to that in an ethical manner?
Well, I'll tell you a story.
I would love one.
One of my, I was just a couple months into practice, and I was ready to leave my office on a Saturday morning. It was like 10:45. I was just finishing up with my last patient, and I get a phone call from a doula. And she asked me, she goes, is there anything that chiropractic can do to help a woman in labor and the labor stalled? And at this point, I was like a couple months into practice. I'm like, yeah, of course, no big deal, right? Meanwhile, like in my heart of hearts, I knew theoretically, yes, right? If this woman was subluxated, that chiropractic, by reducing those subluxations, is going to allow her body to facilitate a normal birth process, right? That's not even a question in my mind. So, I went and I went to visit her in the hospital, and fortunately the doctor and the midwife both welcomed me in. I wouldn't have done it just on my own. But they allowed me to come in, and I went to introduce myself, and the woman was super happy to have me. She, came over and introduced herself. I'll still never forget. Her name was Trisha. And she said, oh, hi, thank you so much for coming. And, when somebody is able to get up and greet you and shake your hand and make eye contact and all that, you can tell that they've still got quite a long ways to go in labor, right? There's still plenty of time. And so talking with her, I find out that her water had been broken for 24 hours. She was on Pitocin for the last 12. Baby was still, too high, and her contraction, she was like 4 centimeters dilated, and her contractions really weren't productive, and she didn't feel any pressure in her pelvic floor the entire birth process, right? This is a mom who, for all intents and purposes, like birth had just completely stalled, right? And she said, can chiropractic help me? And I said, well, I'll tell you this, chiropractic's not going to treat your stalled labor, right? It's not going to treat the birth process. But what chiropractic will do is, by addressing these subluxations, these abnormal neurobiomechanics, right? Areas where your spine and pelvis aren't moving the way that they're supposed to, and it's disrupting neurological control over your body. If you have those and chiropractic can reduce that, your body's going to be better for it. Now, does that mean you might progress naturally through labor? Sure. But does it automatically mean that? No, that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is reduce your subluxations to allow your body to naturally work more appropriately. And then whatever comes from it, comes from it. So she said, okay, great, let's do it. So, I didn't have a table or anything. We were in the hospital, and I had her lay down on all four, holding onto like a birth ball. And I basically did like a Nuka triceps pull type of adjustment on her sacrum. And then I adjusted C2, and she was all clear. All of my objective indicators for subluxation were gone. So I said, all right, you're all set. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if your nervous system starts kicking in and you start noticing changes, in the next, half hour or so, right? And then I left. And of course, I didn't hear anything back later that day. And I'm, at home pacing. I'm like 6 months out of chiropractic school, and I'm freaking out. Like, what the hell did I just do to this mom? What's going to happen? It's going to be on the local news, local chiropractor, ruined birth at hospital, whatever. So the next morning, I reach out to the doula. And she tells me that half an hour after I left, this mom had a second release of fluids. She went from 2 above the ischial spine to 2 below the ischial spine. She went from 4 centimeters to 7 centimeters. She started feeling contractions for the first time her entire pregnancy, and she ended up progressing 3 hours later to a vaginal birth. Right now, I could step back and say, hey, look at what I did. Look at what chiropractic did for this mom. And the reality is, chiropractic didn't do anything for this mom. Chiropractic allowed this mom's body to do what it was always capable of doing. And I think having that distinction is really important because, one, it allows people to see beyond just the limited understanding they have of physiology, right? Most people think, oh, you press here on the neck, it's going to affect here on the neck, right? They don't understand, oh yeah, if you adjust here on the neck, you can influence the foot, right? So really talking to people about the relationship between chiropractic, the nervous system, subluxation, adaptability, and what the adjustment does allows them to see possibility beyond what beyond what they otherwise would have. But it also allows you to attract into your office people who otherwise wouldn't have expected chiropractic to be an option for them. Right. One of the things that I love is that we get a ton of babies in the office and even older kids who come in for, non-musculoskeletal issues. And it's not because we're out there claiming that we're treating those musculoskeletal issues as much as we're talking to people about the possibility that resides within their body and the healing capacity they have that chiropractic allows to be fully expressed. And it's a subtle distinction, but it's a really important one that I think allows us to safely talk about the effects that we have on the entire body.
That's amazing. And there's so much that you just said that I really want to unpack because I just find it and I just want to get into and just get some additional value. I love the way you phrase it in terms of like going through everything. You're at that birth, right? Wouldn't your body be better off without this subluxation? And I think almost like this issue or this line is that like that mindset, it makes perfect sense, but it might not be sexy enough to sell a $12,000 care plan. You know what I mean? Like it just might not be. And I think that that's almost where like even the anti-subluxation people get hung up is that we haven't been totally clear in our communication. If you look back at necessarily like practice management groups in the past and stuff like that. And in that, let's be real. I mean, we can look at the Reggie Gold Great Chiropractic Debate, but not everybody was that strong. Right? Like,
let's be honest. Like, DD originally sold chiropractic as a treatment for, deafness. BJ, if you look at a lot of the writings, it was about getting sick people well. It was about, even the advertisements in those old Palmer advertisements and write-ups in the newspaper that people have framed in their offices. It talks about, chiropractic treating condition. For the most part, that was the understanding of chiropractic at a time. And I think a problem is that people like Reggie have done an amazing job. And I put Reggie up at the top of the list on what really made me understand the salutogenic approach to chiropractic, right? The idea of reducing subluxations for the sole purpose of reducing subluxations because it increases the body's adaptive capacity and allows the body to express itself more completely. Like, to me, Reggie is at the forefront of that. But that's not how chiropractic has always been presented, whether it's, in the last 10 years or in the first 10 years of the profession. And I think it's up to us who really understand the importance of subluxation and the value in correcting subluxation for the sole purpose of doing so, that it's important for us to really be clear in our communication and help others find that same clarity for themselves.
I love it. It's like as busy as the office is, how busy would it be if we could call our shots and say, this kid with ear infections, 2 adjustments, boom, done. No more ear infections. It's like, how busy would it be if we could just hit 3-pointers like that all day? And that's just not what it is. And that's not what chiropractic is. And I think that that's just hugely, hugely, hugely valuable to actually understand. And even one thing you said, like, they have no idea, they don't have an understanding of physiology. We're like, we hit C2, it could affect your neck, it also could affect your foot, but it's also like, well, I just don't know if it's going to. Your body's gonna be better off.
Yeah, and let's be real. I mean, fortunately for us, chiropractic is so amazing that the vast majority of our patients do respond exactly the way that we would expect them to. It's the people that it's the people, and this just goes to show you how ingrained this mindset is, even in somebody like myself, who I'm perfectly clear on the salutogenic value of chiropractic, but there's still the people that I stay up at night being like, well, what am I missing? Right. And the truth is I may not be missing anything. This person's body just doesn't have it. So it doesn't just take us understanding it, but it takes us constantly reminding each other and being surrounded by other chiropractors who understand that and speak it in that way. So that way we don't get bogged down in thinking that we're trying to treat these people either, because it's very easy to go down that rabbit hole as a provider.
I love it. Yeah. And I have somebody, because I'm the same way, up at night, and you're just like, man, like, what did I miss this? What's going on? Should I be doing something extra? Should I have given them a Denerol? Like, what's going on? And I'll tell you, grounding me all the time, my wife is actually a neonatal ICU nurse and understands chiropractic philosophy, I think, sometimes better than I have, even having never read a green book or anything like that. Her, not me. But just constantly being that reminder of like, listen, you're not God. Like, you're just here to adjust the subluxation, let their body do it.
Yeah.
And that's just it's cool to remember. I think that this concept of prenatal care, and one thing that you brought up, like you got called in, you never met this woman before, a doula called you to go into the hospital, labor's not progressing. I think that this like treatment of low back pain, obviously as the only thing for chiropractic, and treatment of that symptom, that I personally reject that is a treatment for that symptom. I think that the back pain only in pediatric chiropractic is the mom who comes in breech at 38 weeks. And I think that we've in the past have done a really, really, really poor job educating.
We have.
To the point where I almost get frustrated when a mom is referred in at 38 weeks because they're breech. And it's like being able to look at that and educate and be like, listen, I'm going to take care of you now because we want this we want your pelvis to be in the best position possible to let it do what it needs to do, but also afterwards, but then also before. That's the really, really, really hard thing. And I'm sure it seems as though, based on like your community, what I've seen, you have like a great, great, great referral network, probably better than my own. So I would love to just hear, and I don't care who else is listening, just my own personal gain, how you really address that beyond. I mean, you just brought it up, but just a little bit more in terms of those other cases like that. How you address that person who's just like, listen, I'm here because my doula said, my midwife said, like, I'm breech, my OB said I'm breech, and the chiropractic might be able to help, and I don't want to have a C-section, and that's my only goal. Like, I would love to hear just a little bit more about how you would assess, because we all have it in a situation like that.
I think there's a couple things. We obviously want to help the patient in front of us in as much as we possibly can. And what I'll usually do is in the consultation, I'll discuss the changes of subluxation and how that happens, not just in pregnancy, but probably decades before she ever got pregnant, right? Early in childhood, as a little girl, learning to walk, falling down on her butt, shifting, her spine and her pelvis, and how she's built muscle memory and movement patterns and compensations around that underlying subluxation over the course of decades. Because even though she can't go back in time and come in for care earlier, I want her to understand, not only for herself, but for her friends and family, as well as for her future pregnancies, that this is not something that just pops up at 36, 38 weeks and now baby's breech, that this is something that's probably been happening for decades earlier. And obviously I say, the first and foremost we need to do is clear out your pelvis of subluxations and hopefully allow your body to get back to a neutral state so the pelvic floor and the uterine muscles can relax and baby can find the best position for themselves. Let's get you in every single day. We're going to adjust those subluxations until they're no longer present, until we no longer have objective indicators of subluxation, and then hopefully that'll give baby enough time to do so, right? And then of course we'll set you up for postpartum to help your body heal so that we can correct and stabilize this going forward. Then what I also typically do is I'll reach out to the provider that referred them. And I'll start to educate them more on what are the signs and the symptoms that this underlying sacral subluxation, that this pelvic subluxation was there long before baby was ever in a breech position, right? And I think this is actually something that chiropractors can do, which is put together almost a referral sheet for OBs and midwives and another one for pediatricians. What are the objective indicators they can look out for that say, yeah, this person is clearly subluxated? Because as much as we'd love to tell them, refer every single pregnant person, refer every single child in your practice. The reality is they're still coming from an allopathic mindset. Most of them won't. But if we can help them see objective indicators of subluxation earlier, if we can point out to them, hey, if you're doing an evaluation and you're doing a consult with a new patient and you see some postural distortions, if they start complaining of pubic symphysis discomfort, if they start feeling round ligament pressure, right? What are the things that an OB or a midwife can look out for earlier in pregnancy and get that mom to us earlier? Because let's be real, very few women are completely asymptomatic, having amazing, wonderful pregnancies with no objective indicators of subluxation, and all of a sudden, 38 weeks, boom, baby's breech, right? That just doesn't happen. We see indicators of subluxation long before that. But how can we expect providers, how can we expect the public to understand that if most chiropractors can't communicate it well? So what can we do as chiropractors to educate our referral sources, to educate on our Facebook pages, to educate our existing patients and even people who aren't patients? Or aren't, the relevant patients. I mean, I remember when we first opened up, you're new in practice, you pretty much want to see anybody and everybody. I remember talking to, truck drivers who are single, no family, about pregnancy and pediatric care, because one, I wanted them to understand the chronicity behind their own subluxations, but two, I wanted them to know that if they have friends or family or eventually themselves who are in a situation, that chiropractic is available for them. So my entire talk is always about subluxation, the chronicity of it, where it starts early off. And when I'm building relationships with other providers, I'm always talking to them about what are these subtle signs that they may notice in their office before it becomes a last ditch. Hopefully this will, help. And some providers will really accept that and listen, and other providers, may be a little bit more hesitant to do that. But honestly, just the fact that they're open and having that relationship with you and referring at any phase is a positive thing. But the more that we can show them earlier on, the value of correcting these subluxations, even independent of other symptoms, I think is really the key and the value for them.
That's awesome. And if you guys are watching, you saw me looking down. It's because I was burning notes, and I hope that you were too. That was awesome. Just the biggest key thing that I took away from that is it would be really easy to say we want to see you every day until baby turns. It would be so easy to say that, right? And it's just like we want to see you every day until the subluxation holds. If they turn before that, I want to continue seeing you every day until this adjustment holds. If Absolutely. They don't turn, I'm not going to adjust you if you're holding, because you need it.
Here's the thing to keep in mind as far as pregnancy is that head down is just half the battle. A baby that's head down, that's in the asynclitic position, that is not allowing the head to properly thin out and dilate the cervix, that's causing an anterior lip, that's causing a shoulder dystocia, that's causing an abnormal presentation. These can be even more stressful on a mom than having a breech baby and having a planned cesarean. So I think it's important for us to really understand that, hey, great, even if baby turns after one adjustment, that's wonderful, but that's not what's really going to support you as much as it possibly could. We need to address these subluxations up until the day that you go into labor, and sometimes even during labor, to really make sure that your pelvis is performing properly, that your pelvic floor and uterine muscles can do exactly what they're capable of doing, that your nervous system can regulate the entire process, so that your body can adapt to this amazing thing that you're capable of doing, but also that your body and you and baby can transition to this new life together in a smooth and efficient manner.
Well, awesome. I hope that everyone was listening. I got so much more out of this than just breaking down a case study. This was good for practice. This was good for everything, for communication. And I guess that's why the ICPA asks you to instruct, because you're pretty dang good at it. So just with that, I mean, we've been going. I want to thank you so much for taking the time away from your family. You're still in the office and you're Eastern time, so it's like 7:40 at night there. I don't know what time you closed, but appreciate it.
We close at 6:30, but I'll rush home and get bedtime right before my kids fall asleep.
That's awesome. But I don't want to hold you too long. Is there anything like parting words of wisdom, advice, anything like that you want to include? And then just kind of end with if somebody wants to be further in contact with you or wants to work for you or anything like that, how they can reach out to you.
Yeah. So, I think for me, and I actually open up a lot of my talks this way, but I feel like it's the thing that really changed, because I'm a second generation chiropractor, but my understanding was really orthopedic in nature up until the point that my dad exposed me to the other side of chiropractic and subluxation right before I went to school. And it was actually in first quarter with Dr. Koch in Pierce Results Club. I'll never forget when he opened up a green book and he read for the first time something from a green book that I never even knew existed. And I'll never forget what it said. He said, "We chiropractors work with the subtle substance of the soul. We release the prisoned impulse, the tiny rivulet of force that emanates from the mind and flows over the nerves to the cells and stirs them into life. We deal with the magical power that transforms common food into living, loving, thinking clay." That I can go through. I usually go through the whole thing during my initial talks, but it ends with that whole statement about have you more faith in a knife or a spoonful of medicine than the innate power that animates the internal living world? And that question, I think, is so important for chiropractors, because I see a lot on whether it's the ICPA thread or other threads where people are asking questions like, hey, I've been treating this person, right? I've been treating this person for X amount of time and their colic is still there, or babies still breach, or X, Y, or Z. And I think it's really important that we not lose sight of the value of the adjustment, and that instead of viewing the adjustment as a modality to naturally approach an allopathic type of practice, what we should really be doing is looking at the deleterious effects of subluxation and value the adjustment, in that if somebody hasn't changed and if they haven't healed the way that you expect them to, maybe the answer is probably more chiropractic and not less. That if we really tap into BJ's words from that green book about the innate power that animates the internal living world, and that we have the ability through our adjustment to influence the expression of that innate intelligence and allow that body to have a greater capacity to adapt and heal and regulate and coordinate and do all the things that the body does, that the answer is usually more chiropractic and less. That if somebody isn't responding the way you expect them to, ask yourself, are you really clearing out all their subluxations? Maybe there's a different analysis that you can do to find another level of subluxation. Maybe you need to change the order of your adjustments to hit it in a different combination, and realize that there's some adjustments that you don't need to do and some adjustments that you were missing that you weren't getting by just changing the order of the way that you intervene. I think the key for us is to recognize the best thing that we can do to serve humanity is reduce subluxation and allow for those words that BJ spoke about to really come to light.
Well, I love it. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me and everybody here. Guys, this is another episode of the Chiropractic Research Breakdown. One of the things I love to do is take information like this and put it into an evidence-informed, philosophically driven patient newsletter. So if you guys want to check out something like that, go over to chiroedgemedia.com. If not, that's cool too. Hope you keep watching, because we're going to keep delivering content for you. Thanks, Doc. I look forward to catching you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate you.